There was a house at the end of the street where I lived in Maili, and the street I lived on is Kaukamana Street. My neighbors were the Salcedos, the Corderos, and Johnny Martin and his son. This house at the end of the street was where you took a right turn to go to the school. Left turn, I don't remember, but I remember the house. It was abandoned. The windows were broken, no front door. And the strange thing about the house is these kiawe trees which grew around it. And those trees were constantly covered by this beige-colored dust. Constantly. What used to happen is I would wake up late at night, and so would the other kids in the neighborhood, and they would see candlelight in that house. Obviously, someone squatting. But you'd never see the person the next day. But there would always be a foul stench coming from that old abandoned house. And so one night, as I'm sleeping, I notice I hear a little bit of laughing, some guitar playing, some singing. And I look out my bedroom window because it's facing toward the end of the street, and I see candlelight. The next morning, there's nothing. I asked my parents about it, and they said all it was a bunch of hippies who were squatting at Mauna Lahi Beach or somewhere in Makaha, and just happened upon this old abandoned house, and they would camp out overnight. I said, okay. But constantly, over that house was that beige-colored dust encompassing those kiawe trees that grew over the house. One afternoon, as I'm returning home from school, there's police, there's ambulance, there's even a fire truck. The entire neighborhood standing on the street in front of that old abandoned house. Bodies covered by sheets being brought into the ambulance. My father had come home early. Standing with him was Mr. Salcedo, Johnny Martin. They all looked white as sheets. When my father came home, my Hanai mother asked him what happened. He wouldn't discuss it, not for a while. That is, until Johnny Martin's dog, Spooky, disappeared. And so, Johnny Martin, Mr. Salcedo, even Mr. Cordero, and my father, that afternoon went looking for the dog. Never found him. As I glanced at that old abandoned house, I noticed that beige-colored dust was no longer anywhere in those kiawe trees. And so I happened to mention it to my father. And as he was talking to Johnny Martin and Mr. Salcedo, he said, well, what you said? I said, Daddy, you know the dust covered the kiawe trees over this house, the one at the end of the street? Yeah. Look, no more. Had them this morning, but all gone. Did it rain? No. But all of a sudden, he looks at me, looks at the two men, whispers something in their ears. Each of them head to their garages. Mr. Salcedo, Johnny Martin, and my father grab a machete, one of them each. They each have cans of kerosene. They run across the street to the old abandoned house, start chopping up all the wood, stuffing it into the house, pouring kerosene all over it. They set the house on fire. It lights up like a match, and in no time, it's just a smoldering ember of what used to be an abandoned house. The kiawe trees burned down too. Later on that night, I overheard my father telling my Hanai mother exactly what happened. He says, you know, that kid would say something to me that made sense. You ever notice that that abandoned house, the kiawe tree, is always covered by some kind of funny-looking dust? My Hanai mother says, yes. You ever notice, every time those hippies or anything else, anybody else, stay inside that house overnight, you don't see them the next day. You don't see where they went. Except the time the police, they found the bodies of those hippies inside. My Hanai mother says, well, what are you trying to say? Good thing we didn't burn down the house. Had Johnny Martin's dog inside, Spooky. When we seen what happened to the dog, we figure out what happened to all those people. My Hanai mom says, what? You know that funny looking dust covering the kiawe trees? It's not dust. Spiders.